and welcome to Lakeside Drive. In a weekend that was all about tyres, temperatures and tantrums, we also got a world champion. Thanks for joining us while we review the Qatar Grand Prix. And I'm joined by my friend and yours, Thomas J. Pants. There's your new. Hopefully you're wearing pants. It's early here. It's late there. We're gonna do our best. No James today. So when I say our best, I absolutely mean doing our worst. How are you, mate?
I'm well, buddy. How are you?
Yeah, very good. It was an exciting weekend of racing. There was a lot of racing because I'd forgotten that it was a sprint weekend, and there was just a lot going on. And so I think for this episode, we're going to focus on the main qualifying and main race, but we will, of course, acknowledge Oscar Piastri's exceptional win because it is a win, and that does mean that the last two people to win for McLaren since Jenson Button were two Australians. How good is that?
As if Lando's even going to get a win in that car. That's where it's at the moment. A bit like Tommy T and George Russell not scoring points. It'll, this will be the new version of that.
Yeah, he does hold a record which no driver wants, which is now, I think it's like he overtook Hulk in terms of like the amount of race starts that he's had still without a win. So not something that he particularly wants on his record, but it'll be there for a while yet, I reckon. We do have a new drivers' champion this weekend. Max Verstappen won on a Saturday. First time in a long time that's happened. What were your thoughts when he was crowned?
Oh, thoroughly deserving. I mean, that car, and him in that car particularly, is out of this world. I don't think we've seen a better performance over a whole season ever in the history of the sport that I can remember anyway. So I think he still goes on to win the last 6 races. Although he's not dominating the race. Like he's not dominating like he has earlier in the season. I mean, McLaren's were 5 or 6 seconds off him. I'm not sure how much of that is just him managing the pace and managing the team's expectations to finish out the year, or it's Red Bull have completely given up on anything to do with upgrades of this car for the last 5 months, hence why we haven't seen any massive performance boost from them, yet they're still winning and we're just seeing the other cars catch up. So, but yeah, thoroughly deserving. 3-time champion. Jeez, we could be looking at a 5-6-time champion in 3 years with 100 wins, and we're going, geez, is he better than Lewis? Is he the greatest of all time? I don't think Max is the kind of driver that will drop a couple of world championships like Lewis has. He dropped one against Nico Rosberg in 16, and then the one he lost on his debut year as well. I mean, if it all went to script for Lewis, there could be a few more in there. So I don't think Max is the kind of driver for that to happen. So anyway, yeah, thoroughly deserving. Congratulations to them and the team, and excellent.
Absolutely. And he did kind of say that this is one that kind of feels the best because it's not shrouded in any type of controversy. That is an all-out dominance by both him as a driver and the team. And it does, as you said, really feel like the sky is the limit in terms of what they are capable of achieving with the combination of personnel and drivers that they have at the moment, driver singular that they have at the moment. So we'll see what happens with the second one, which could be quite telling as to how those next couple of years play out. Thinking about another big feature this weekend, which was the driving conditions and the drivers. So as many people would have seen, as a lot of these drivers were getting out of the car, they were struggling, really struggling. Logan retired because he was unwell, and they'd said that he had flu-like symptoms earlier in the week, and that made him potentially more susceptible to dehydration. Yep. But Charles said it was twice as hard as Singapore, and he said it was right on the limit. Stroll getting out of the car was incredibly laboured and said he said that he felt like he was passing out in the high G corners. Ocon threw up in his helmet. We had 2 or 3 drivers who took themselves into the medical centre afterwards and reportedly fainted. Alonso said it was the most comparable race to Malaysia, which he still thinks was harder than this one. So clearly his experience there really showing. But exactly. But the combination of really high ambient temperatures, a 3 to 4 stop race, which basically meant that every lap was a qualifying lap, which put a huge amount of stress into their bodies, especially through those high speed corners. Yeah. And all I could think about actually was, running really long distances here in the heat. No one likes that feeling where you're just completely depleted of all your like sodium and glycogen and you've got absolutely nothing, and you get that experience of hitting the wall and it's just going, I'm conscious, but I'm actually not. I don't feel like I am, and you kind of feel like you're going to pass out and or throw up, and you can only imagine how dangerous that would be here, because the one thing that I'm not dealing with when I'm running is G-forces. So you throw in on top of that, whatever it was, 60 odd laps of 4 and 5G corners. What were your thoughts? I know you might be someone who's a bit more tough on them than perhaps I might have been, but I'm interested to think what your perspective was.
Oh, look, I am that way, naturally inclined. I'll suck it up, or get to do 60 quali laps. That's what we want to see as fans. We want to see these guys driving on the absolute limit all the time. I think, though, to give them some credit, this is the culmination of everything being at the most extreme, being the heat that they're in. They are conditioned to be driving a car at say 70% of what they can. They're not conditioned to go out and do what Webber, Alonso, and your Hamiltons did back in 2006 through to 2013-14, where it was absolutely flat out the whole time. So their bodies aren't in that condition, and I think it was probably the perfect storm for all of the potential issues that could arise from a health perspective. I think we're pretty good at this sport. Max, you don't see Max complaining. I don't think that's an indication of how tough the race was either. Max said it wasn't the toughest race, so I think it's just who you speak to, and maybe it's just the culture of the day that they get to openly discuss these things, because it wouldn't have happened in yesteryear, and that's okay. But I think, look, I'd like to see them just race as hard as they can and push every single lap and not have to worry about nursing tyres, and then, it's easier and taxing on the body. This is the pinnacle of the sport, and we want it, the toughest and the hardest that it can be at every stage. So, probably a culmination of all the things happening at once, but depending on who you speak to.
I think my one thing, and I hear you to a point in terms of going, we want to see the best of the best every weekend. Racing to 70% isn't reflecting what they are really capable of necessarily. The one thing I think of, though, is just how, knowing physiologically how this works, and the fact that the likelihood, if you haven't carb loaded and prehydrated and all of that type of thing, which I'm sure that many of them still would have done, is that the impact can be that you pass out. And that could be catastrophic when it comes to driver safety. So that's the one thing that I kind of go, well, wait a second. And you don't know that until it's about to happen. And I think when Logan Sargent did retire, he had said already once, he's like, starting to really not feel good. And then it was another couple of laps before he actually retired. So I think he was really, obviously, no one wants to. He really was thinking hard about it, and probably thought that he was not in a safe driving condition. Drivers are kind of like cars as well. You can get the black and orange flag kind of not in safe condition to drive. So I think just knowing that could be the culmination of these types of things. It's a bit of a moot point because we are going back here at a slightly different time next year, which should mean that temperatures are lower. Because the thing is that, we're talking 5 to 7 degrees lower could make all of the difference here. it really was right on the edge, but a really interesting conversation because, like you said, it's not that often that we kind of see that type of chat afterwards from the drivers, kind of just really expressing how physical it was and how much of a challenge it was. The other thing that was quite the topic of the day was tyres and pyramid curbs. So we had maximum stint lengths of 18 laps to make sure that the integrity of the tyres was in place, basically, because they had concerns over the curb strikes on Friday. So basically what happened was that Pirelli found damage in terms of the separation of the sidewall during Friday practice, which was caused by that severe edge on the exit curbs. And if you haven't looked at it, go and take a look. It does literally look like the pyramids. Yeah, pretty gnarly, and certainly a really big, impact in terms of how this race played out. Should they have seen this coming, Campy? What do you reckon?
Yes and no. This is, different tyre compounds and the way they're constructed, and just even the different shapes on some of these, on some of the curbs can create things that we've never seen before. And when the track's too hot too, if it had been 7 or 8 degrees lower, as you said, it may have that affects the way the tyres operate, so you may not get the problems they arise. I think they're generally pretty good on this stuff. They know generally how they're going to work, and we're a pretty safety conscious sport these days, so they're always going to go in that direction. So, which I don't mind mandatory pit stops. I think 2 or 3 pit stops mandatory in a race is way better for us as fans. It throws jeopardy into it. What I don't like is the mandatory length on the tyres. If you can run that extra 4 or 5 laps on the tyres and then go onto a softer and then that works out better for us as fans and strategy. But having the limits on the laps of the tyres I don't like, because that then takes some strategy out of it too. But we see what it creates on the other side as well. It creates, we're not lifting and coasting. We're not managing our tyre loads in order to be faster over the duration of a race. We're basically getting in the car and going flat out all the time. And when you're driving flat out, we'll see the effects on the drivers and they'll make more mistakes, but we'll also see the effects on the cars. You think of the McLarens of yesteryear, think 99, 2000, the fastest things we've ever seen on track, but you never knew whether they were going to blow up or not at any given moment.
Make it through the race, exactly.
Yeah. Which was fun to watch. Now, I understand that teams design cars now around the fact for tyre wear, and that's a big consideration. So if you take that out, that it will alter the way that we design cars as well. So, it's a catch-22. It's a fine balance to get right. Do I think we've got it right at the moment? I think it needs some touching up and some small changes, but I think we probably went to the extreme this weekend, only with making having a limit on the laps you could do on tyres. So I like mandatory.
Yeah, and it was interesting in terms of. Yeah, it was interesting in terms of how it also affected the way they were driving, because then, of course, we had track limits being handed out left, right, and centre, and. Interestingly, from Lewis Hamilton's perspective, he was like, I don't really understand why we have to have that rule at this track, because of the drop on the other side of the curb. We're going to lose so much time and get so much damage to our tyres that it's actually not in our best interests to drive in a way that's going to put you off the track. And yet, every single one of them, I think, by the end of the race did. So I think, that definitely, there was a lot going on this weekend, just like you said, this culmination of things going on. It was just the perfect storm for quite a lot of drama, actually, in the end. So an exciting race, regardless of kind of, I suppose, what anyone thinks of any of these given issues. It certainly produced some exciting racing.
And the race that Carlos won, right, where Max started from a fair way behind, so they controlled the pace of that race perfectly to suit their setup. So if you did that at a Monaco, say we're doing 1 minute 10s for qualifying, but then in the races they're doing 1 minute 21s, There's no way guys are going to put it into the wall when these cars are capable of doing 11 seconds quicker than what they're racing. Even with a full fuel load and some worn tyres, they should still be able to produce 1 minute 15s and drive that car on the edge. But that is the flip side of how we do it. We're managing pace in order to, be faster over the race distance, which I think as fans we don't want to see. So, anyway.
No, for sure. We do think about what it's like from a viewpoint of the fan as well, and the type of weekend that we get to see at the end of the day. The other thing that was great over the weekend was our Discord. So let's go to our Discord comment of the week. This week it goes to Nick H saying, "Did Stroll just remember how to racecraft? Oh, 5-second penalty, never mind."
Too good.
We will talk about Stroll a bit later, but that was just the timing of it was perfection. So Nick H, Anya, thank you for contributing to our awesome Discord Legends of the Week. Campy, who's yours?
Oh, it's got to be Hillary. She put some photos up of her dog Bower, and and all of the people who put photos up of their animals. I'm literally not an animal guy. I never have been one until I got this dog, and this dog stole my heart. But just the way, we're so invested in this sport and watching it and entertained and, participating in all the things that come with it. And the animals just sit there the same face every week, and they want their head in the same spot on your leg. You can't see their eyes. It's tucked into a nook. So my photo goes to Hillary and Bower for Bower, just wherever his head was. I'm not sure where, but yeah, I like that stuff. So there we go.
Absolutely here with you for that. The animal content is just superb. They're so expressive. When it's whatever time in the morning, they're often just a very ungentlemanly hour, and that the interest in being there is often written all over these poor animals' faces who are suffering through with you. So absolutely, thank you to everybody who puts photos of their beautiful animals up on our Discord. Yep. For me, the Discord legend of the week came from Listless. And it was partially because of this comment, which was, "Still here wishing we had Bernie this weekend rather than Karoon counting tyres on his fingers," which, to be fair, it was a tough weekend when it came to trying to keep track of how many laps those tyres had already done, so that, what was the actual 18 count. They're putting old tyres back on. They'd already done 5 laps. What does that mean? It was very tricky to keep track of. It's more the fact that it would have been a perfect weekend to have Bernie, because there were so many insights that we would have loved to hear from her when it came from the strategy side of things, because that was just such a big feature of the weekend. But Liz, thank you for contributing as well. You're all amazing. Keep it up. Let's talk about the weekend and Tommy T's broadcast review. Let's... I'm not going to ask you a question. You just talk, Campy.
Well, look, I've got a couple of bones to pick this weekend because of the obnoxious time zone that I'm currently in and having to watch some races. I missed the qualifying on Friday, and I tried to watch a replay of it, but it didn't come up for 48 hours, so I didn't get it until the Sunday. And then I tried to watch what was labelled the sprint qualifying, and as I was 3/4 of the way through the sprint qualifying, which I thought it was actually the qualifying from Friday. So I was fuming. So I knew Oscar had won it, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Anyway, and then I figured out what was going on. So that's my bone to pick. But the big one, that's my bone to pick with Foxtel. The big one for me is, I genuinely like Karoon. I don't think he's a bad guy, and his contributions a lot of the time are great. But this weekend, the Lando bias and horse shit that we had to put up with, when clearly Oscar Piastri has made massive strides throughout the course of the season, and now not just beating him on track, beating him in race pacing conditions that are harsh and harder, and he's not quite there yet. Lando's probably still just got him on race pace and qualifying pace. But you know what? Oscar is consistent. He's putting it together. And if I have to listen to any more of this bullshit about Lando being unlucky for not getting the results that he deserves and the British horse shit that comes with it, I'm going to throw something at my TV, I think. It beggars belief. Like, he's not that good. He still hasn't won a race. Danny Rick still won a race. Now Oscar's got a second and a first over the course of the weekend and solidified himself and arrived in Formula One. You know, not that he hasn't been here all year, but these are the first dominant results he's got. And all I hear about is, oh, how much better Lando is. Give me a fucking break. Sort it out.
I think the thing which I miss from all of that is how much we should be hearing about Oscar. Yeah. You know, imagine if he was British. Imagine if he was British and he was a rookie and he was winning sprint races and second in races and qualifying up the top. Like, that would be endless, but we're not getting it.
It'd be the second coming of Christ.
This is very true. My bone to pick is actually something that kind of was prompted by somebody on Discord, actually, just talking about this circuit, which I think was just the most accurate description ever, which is that as fans watching, it looks like an airport. And like, it is literally like from a broadcasting perspective, from a broadcasting perspective as a fan, it was like this whole track is just lights and tarmac and that's it. You don't go and you've got this beautiful scenery on the outside and the rolling hills and we'll pan back and there's just not a lot for them to work with, to be fair. But it is a bit of an eyesore when it comes to, you know, I suppose the setting of it and that type of thing. And obviously we've all got quite significant issues with where it is located, but we all know that cash is king, said Campy. So, you know, that just is what it is. But I think maybe the combination of factors this weekend, it's not like this location is not in my good books. Did you have any thoughts about the anthem? I know that we had some Discord contributors who were very excited. Well, it was a pretty fantastic band. It was, I don't think there was a singer or anything like that. It was just the musical side of things. Very professional. And we had a French horn front and centre, which I knew that we had some band nerds in our Discord that were very excited about that. And apparently it might be some sort of a quite well-known player there. So I think overall, what's your rating?
Look, I didn't watch heaps of it other than I really didn't. I'll give it a 6.
I'm giving it a 5 just because I don't want drivers. I'm kind of thinking about a combination of the broadcast and the whole track and everything else. It's a 5 out of 10 because I just don't want drivers passing out and racing around airports is no fun. All right.
Do we really need another race in the Middle East?
Exactly. The answer to that is absolutely not. Let's talk about our predictions from last week, our success and failures. Campy, I think you might be gradually getting your own points here with your predictions. Not yet having a full run, but not too bad as well. So, Campy, you had front row Max and Lewis. That was actually obviously not far off after Lando's lap time and Piastri's lap time got deleted. So he was third, so not too bad there. Podium, you had Max, Piastri and Alonso. Well, that's 2 out of the 3 and Alonso wasn't too far off. 10th, you had Carlos, though, and he did not start. So welcome to my game, my friend.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I texted James, and I can show proof of it, I said, bold prediction, Lewis to die. I said Lewis to die into turn 1, which I say most weeks anyway, but it actually happened this week and he didn't read it out. Couldn't believe it.
It doesn't count. It does not count if you say it every weekend and then it just happens to happen once. Like, that's just a law of averages.
Just to be clear, when I say die, I mean crash. I don't mean, proverbially actually die. I mean crash, just for the offendable people out there.
So my prediction was front row Max and Carlos. So one of the two of them got there. Podium was Max, Lando and Carlos. So look, Again, 2 out of
Pretty
3. It's just that Carlos was a long way off. And 10th, I had Ocon. Where did he? I think he was about 8th in the end, or 7th or 8th. So not terrible. And plus, I put someone in 10th and they got to finish the race. So well done, Ocon. James had front row, Max and Lando. Could have been very close, but not quite. Podium, Max, Charles and Lewis. Not so much. And 10th was Joe, who was in fact in the points this weekend, which was very exciting. So I think we've broken a bit of a curse of not the most terrible predictions for this weekend, but we'll see how that goes for Texas, which will be interesting. All right, let's get into our team-by-team analysis, starting from who I have put on the back, which is Haas. So Hülkenberg qualified 15th, finished 16th. He had a penalty because he started in Carlos Sainz's grid spot, which was not the ideal start to the race. K-Mag 19 and finished in 14th. Not an awesome weekend for this team, Campy.
No, once again, the Haas is, if you look at Ferrari's pace, that'll show us where Haas is going to be. I felt sorry for Hülkenberg's start going into Carlos' spot. I don't completely understand how it happened, and I think when he pulled in, he knew exactly what he'd done, but you can't go backwards on these things, and there's nothing you can do about it. So, unfortunately for him, he got that penalty. Qualifying, they're generally pretty good in qualifying. I would have thought that this race with the tyres and the strategy to, run a maximum 18 laps, so it was a 3-stopper or a 2-stopper if you did what Max did. I thought that would probably suit the Haas a bit more, but it just didn't eventuate. Just showed some general lack of pace all weekend, really.
Yeah, I thought that might have been a bit of an opportunity for those back-running teams, especially for Haas, because they do tend to struggle with tyre deg. I thought it might be more of an opportunity for them in comparison to kind of what played out. But K-Mag had some good battles at points, but all in all, a kind of pretty nothing weekend for them. I completely agree with you in that you can just see yourself pulling into that grid spot at the start and then going, oh, shit, I'm not meant to be here. But like you said, there's no way out after that. AlphaTauri, we had Liam Lawson qualifying 18th, finishing 17th. Yuki Tsunoda qualified 11th, finished 15th. Liam Lawson will have learned a lot this weekend. I think for the rookies here, it was actually a lot to take away. Once they get rehydrated and they can think straight again, they had tyre strategy, they had restarts, they had dealing with temperatures and that type of thing, sprint weekend, all sorts of variables to learn about being thrown at them. Liam Lawson, do you still think he's overrated?
Sorry, this was the first... did he make that mistake in the race or the sprint race? I'm trying to... where he put it off himself. They were sort of 3 wide into a corner and the car oversteered.
I think that was in the sprint.
Yeah, it was in the sprint. So, yeah, that would have been front. Yeah, because that pulled out one of the 500 safety cars we saw in that in that sprint race.
Yeah.
No, he's not. I don't mean he's overrated. I didn't mean it to put like that. I was just trying to put a level on the hype and the opinions of some people out there, because I'm not sure it was as warranted once you take into all the facts into account. But this was the weekend that he probably needed to have. He got beaten by his teammate pretty convincingly in both qualifyings but do I hold it against him? No, he's taken his shot in F1, and he's got the deal with Red Bull next year. So whether that puts him into not the top drive, probably the AlphaTauri, depending on how that seat works out. But he's definitely in that organisation and they want him. So yeah, it's good. It'll probably be his last race from all accounts. Danny Rick had another good test in the simulator this week, so he'll be good to go in Austin, which is his favourite race, and the greatest country in the world over there in Texas. So I do say that with a bit of tongue in cheek. But yeah, look, not a great weekend for AlphaTauri, the boss Tauri. So Anyway,
Yep.
they'll be looking to score some points pretty consistently in the last 6 races. I think Austin will suit that car, so they'll be looking forward to that one moving up.
Yeah. I'm hoping that they have a bit more of a points haul in Austin. I think it was a pretty tough weekend for both of them by the sounds of things. Like Yuki did all right qualifying in 11th, I think, just given everything. And he had a few lap times deleted and things like that when he was doing all right. So again, a bit of a kind of mediocre weekend, but a lot going on as well. And hopefully they come back fighting fit in Austin. Williams. So obviously we had Sargent qualified 16th and didn't finish after he retired, feeling very unwell, and was obviously physically really struggling when he got out of that car, which was the right call to make. And, you know, I think when it comes to driver safety, it's so rare that you have a driver saying, I don't think I can do this, that the team has to back them. You know, they have to get behind them to say, let's look after you. I don't think, you know, given that it's just such a rarity, you have to trust the drivers that they know their bodies and they know what they're capable of. So yes, like I think like everyone was like, oh, Williams, that's so wonderful, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, sure it is. But also, what else are you going to do? Say no, just suck it up? Like, absolutely not. They did the right thing, but also, you know, they couldn't have done the wrong thing in that scenario. So Albon qualified 14th, finished in 13th. He had a couple of penalties, I think, because of track limits, and he was one who I think did go off to the medical centre afterwards and struggling there. But what are your thoughts when it comes to Sargent? We've had Williams come out and support him, I suppose, verbally, but not with the piece of paper that means everything.
That he wants. Does he warrant? I don't think he's done enough for a seat next year. So, and they've got Albon in that car.
Who replaces him then?
Mick Schumacher.
Yep.
That's the logical, but I don't think there's anyone coming up in F2 that really excites me, other than Doohan, but I mean, that's just because he's an Aussie. And he's had a pretty good second half of the year considering the start he's had, but he's with Alpine anyway, so I prefer to see Doohan in that Alpine spot and get rid of either Gasly or Ocon, but Alpine are pretty pig-headed there, so the only one that makes sense is Mick Schumacher, but apparently he's done some testing with Williams and they're not interested, so that, you know, that's an interesting thing too, because I think Mick did okay against K-Mag in his second year, but unfortunately, I mean, the first year he's racing against that Russian guy, Mazepin. So, and he beat him comfortably throughout the year, but it's not a great measuring stick and learning curve that you should be on when you first get into the sport. So, I think Mercedes have probably just got him there as a name at the moment because, you know, they've obviously had a great relationship with his dad. I would expect a team to throw some resources around Mick Schumacher, but he may have done his dash like some of the famous sons. You look at Senna's son, Nelson Piquet Jr. and some of these ones that have had their shot in F1 and made it more so because of their name. Mick did everything right to get into Formula 1, but he just didn't get the job done. So to answer your question, I don't know who takes the seat. Who do you think, Freya?
I think that's the dilemma, right? Is that we can say he hasn't really done enough for a seat, but then what's your alternative? And that's where and that's kind of how I feel as well. I don't think that it's worth considering the time and effort that they have put into developing Sargent. I don't think it also makes sense for them to just let him have had a 1-year run and start all over again, really, with somebody else. So as much as I think that there could be other drivers who in the next year or two would be better placed in that car, I think for now it's just one of those, like, it's a bit of a sunk cost really in terms of going, we've spent all this money and time developing you're here, so we're just going to keep on with that. And especially if they have tested Mick and that hasn't been super impressive, as much as I don't think he's going to necessarily have a super amount of success in the sport. I do think that he'll probably end up with a seat next year, simply because, as a few people have pointed out, I don't think Red Bull are going to be super keen to put Liam Lawson on loan, and there's nobody else really who at this point would be potentially any better. Let's talk about Alpine. You've just mentioned them. So Gasly qualified 7th, finished in 12th. He had a software-related energy recovery and deployment issue. So I think he was struggling all through the race in order to... So probably did the best with what he had this weekend. Ocon had something happen, which I just don't want to think too much about, which was being physically unwell around lap 15 and 16. And he was one of the ones who said that he was really, really struggling. And that was quite early in the race. And he said, oh my goodness, it's going to be a long, hard race if this is how I'm already feeling. Yeah. Alpine, you've mentioned that they are going to be pretty dog-headed when it comes to, their drivers and not kind of budging on what they have kind of committed to with these two. Do you feel like they are reaching their full potential with the drivers that they currently have?
It's a tough one. I don't rate Ocon, and my rationale for Ocon is the year that he had against Danny Ricciardo, and Danny Rick not only dominated him over one lap, but it was the race pace that was the most staggering difference between the two drivers for me. Yeah, I expected Gasly to come in and probably beat Ocon convincingly, but I don't think that's been the case. I think Ocon got a podium, and as did Gasly as well this year. So if you take those out, I think they've been pretty even points-wise, but I think Ocon's probably got the record over qualifying and probably just in the races, but only by a couple. And that's not following them, that's just off the top of my head. Ocon, for me, every time I see them, he seems to be on top, but that not be a reflection of the reality of the situation. So I just don't rate either of them, and that's where I'm at for this team and this organisation. I think the organisation's got a lot of growing up to do as well, and they need to figure it out. Do I think Doohan's the best fit for that car coming in? As an Aussie, I want to see him on the grid, but I'm not sure that Doohan's probably ready for that spot. But he is in the number one seat to get it. So if they are, why have a junior program if you're not going to exploit it and actually use it? So he would.
I think it's an organisation that they're going to be probably for the time being until they sort their kind of house out. It's not someone people are going to be flocking to, because it doesn't feel organised or in sync in terms of what they are trying to achieve. And I think that's the thing we're seeing with some of these other teams now. They're really starting to go, these are our goals on track, and this is what we're going to do in the organisation to help make sure that happens and make sure that we have the same culture when it comes to performance on and off track to make sure that we actually get the results that we're after. And I think there's just so much going on with Alpine at the moment that they're probably lucky to have the drivers that they do, quite frankly, and it makes sense for them obviously being French, but I don't think they're going to be somebody who's ever going to get kind of a top pick of drivers until they sort themselves out a little bit, quite frankly. It just feels very disjointed as an organisation, and how they're coming together and sorting out, for example, what's been going on with Ocon and Gasly because of the last race, with obviously that whole, team orders situation, which I don't think has been sorted out. As much as they've both said, we've discussed it and it's fine, tell me it's not fine without telling me, they were clearly unimpressed with whatever had been communicated. And that's a dynamic that the organisation has to manage between those two drivers. And I'm like, and if you can't get your own, organisation kind of in check and in sync, and you add a variable like that with two drivers who are potentially not the most compatible, let's put it that way, things are going to get really complicated, and it just doesn't feel like either of them are particularly settled this week. That said, I think they did they qualified really well, both in into Q3, and the race results are what they are, but they just need to get their shit together, quite frankly. All right, let's take a quick break.
I will say that team orders are a story if it's Mercedes, Ferrari, or Red Bull. It's not a story at Alpine. They are not fighting at the top. They are not fighting for race wins. It shouldn't even be a story. It should be, if another guy's faster and this suits or may not help us on track, let them pass. Don't argue, just do it. They don't need to sort it out. Don't address it with the drivers. Don't even give a shit about their attitudes or their egos that come into it. Let it go, because they're trying to get the best outcome for the team at this stage. Until you're in the top three, it doesn't matter.
I would agree with that. And the thing is that by arguing it, you're just setting the whole team back. Like, it does more damage than good. And you discuss it afterwards. All right, let's take a quick break. And we're back. Let's talk about Aston Martin. As you can imagine, I have some thoughts. But before I share them, Alonso qualified in 4th, finished in 6th. He had a bit of a scary moment when he rejoined the track. He also had a really hot seat. What did you think of how he took on this weekend, Campy?
Oh, look, I think these are the sorts of weekends that Alonso loves. Yes, it's a challenging physically, and he said it was physical, and sometimes that's just Fernando playing up to the storylines and being the great actor off track that he can be sometimes. But this is the sort of racing he loves. This is going back to yesteryear, fighting, quality laps all the time, and it does not surprise me one bit that he put it on P4. The car's not as good as it was at the start of the year, and I think the McLarens and the Mercedes clearly jumped that car. So for him to finish 6th, that is a great result for him, and where he's maximising the potential out of that car, and he does that year in, year out. It doesn't matter what machinery he's in, he gets the results and puts the car in places where it shouldn't be. The other hand, you've got his teammate in Stroll, and I'll let you finish talking about that. But that message I woke up to on Saturday morning from you about his performance on Friday was excellent. So
it's all right. So look, I'm gonna try and keep this short, because if I don't try, I'll go on forever. And look, I think like anyone who's listened to our last 2 episodes will know that we have taken a data-driven approach to Stroll's performance. We've also taken a more subjective approach to Stroll's performance. But this weekend, it just all came to a head. Now, I think the thing is, I will say that the footage that we had from the garage, I don't think is clear enough as to what actually happened to make any accusations or say Aston Martin need to blah, 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 whatever. I don't actually think it's clear enough as to what did or didn't happen in that moment as he walked around the corner, and he obviously shoved something, whether that was in fact his trainer or whether that was a wall or whether he was pushing something out of the way. I just don't think it's clear enough from that footage to say what happened. What we can say is how he behaved in the media pen afterwards. Now, it might not be physical, and we can say, look, emotions are really high, he's having a really terrible weekend, he's under so much pressure, blah, blah, blah. However, we have seen any number of drivers in the same situation, if not under much more significant pressure, not treat people in that way. And I think that's the part for me that I just go, don't take it out on a reporter just because you had a terrible qualifying. It was just really disrespectful and unprofessional, I think. And the big thing here is I just go, after we've seen behaviour like that this weekend, I think it's a massively missed opportunity for Aston Martin not to have come out and say, we will be dealing with this matter internally. We never condone behaviour of this nature, and rest assured that we will be taking steps appropriately as an organisation. Because regardless of what did or didn't happen at the back of that garage, everyone wants answers, right? And I think I had a really interesting conversation with a few people about this yesterday in terms of saying, like, is it really our business to kind of get stuck into what Aston Martin should be doing in response to that? And I was like, well, first of all, they need to actually know what happened, and we don't really. But at the same time, obviously something did. He threw his steering wheel out of the car. Now, I've been told that apparently he will be made to pay for any damage that was caused by that. But to me, it's actually not even about, it's not the cost thing, right? It's made of money. So that's hardly going to affect any type of motivation to change behavior. It's the respect that you are showing for your team who are working their butts off to help you have the best weekend possible, which, and to me, that's just not on. And the last thing I'll say about this as well is just the environment. And I think when you're in a garage like that, it's a dangerous place. Do you know what I mean? Like, as much as they have things as neat and tidy as they can and as organized as they can, there are machinery, there's fuel, there's people, there's a reason why all the mechanics are wearing helmets as well. It's a dangerous environment. It's not something you can just stroll around in, and throw wheels around and shove things. Like, so from a safety perspective, you'll love this, Campy. Yeah. It's not a place where you can behave in that way. It's similar to like a construction site, right? Like, pull your shit together.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll say is that, like, I can understand a driver getting out and being frustrated within the confines of his garage and behind a wall. And I remember Danny Rick punched a hole in the wall once after something happened, and I understand that, and that is totally reasonable. But you get your split, you get your 5 seconds where you lash out. It's not to somebody else. It's, whatever it looks like behind there, because we don't want to speculate. But he probably just pushed a wall, punched something. As you get your 5 seconds, but after that, as an adult, you're not a 10-year-old going through your learning to, I don't know what the word is, regulate your emotions. Do not go into the bullpen and act like the fucking spoon-fed little shit you've been for your whole life and play up to. For me, that says it all, right? Anyway.
We'll leave it at that. We will leave it at that when we'll let the rest of it happen on track, where we hope to try and maintain the bounds of the commentary around people's performance. Let's talk about Alfa Romeo. Double points. We're all very excited. Bottas, absolutely great result. Bottas qualified 9th, finished 8th. Zhou qualified 20th, finished 9th.
Right.
That's great. It's so great. I'm very excited about this team this weekend. Big claps to Ruth Buscombe, their strategist, did a phenomenal job this weekend helping them to have a strategy that allowed them to get both those points. I will say that as a team, they had a heap of tyres, especially with Zhou, because he was, obviously, they didn't use them up in Q2 and Q3. So they probably had a little bit more to play with, a little bit more to work with there. But how good was it to see them both in the points at the end, Campy?
This is the race where, they threw up some jeopardy and it wasn't going to play out like the last 20 races had. So they just made the most of their opportunities. They clearly had some pace, and we know degradation for them has been a big issue over the time, and this situation really worked and suited for them. But the best thing is like they made the most of their opportunity. They went out and they actually got the results. And do we love seeing Bottas in the points? Oh, absolutely, because we know he's capable of it. Great driver. But double points, that's just amazing for the team. And it's not a win. We'll never treat it like a win, but that's as good as it gets for that team. And hopefully they can do it one or two more times for the rest of the year. And those sort of results, what they do for organisations behind closed doors and everybody. Oh yeah, we're in for a sniff. Gives extra spring in their step moving forward, and it's good to see. So
Yeah,
I like it.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the other red team, Ferrari. We had Sainz, who qualified in 12th. He didn't start. He had a fuel system issue on his car, and when they took a look at it, they said it was going to take too long to fix in time to get him on the grid, which was devastating. You never want to see a car not start for that reason. It just, takes away from the race, and it means that we have one less decent driver as well in this scenario, who's in the mix. Leclerc qualified 5th, finished 5th. He finished 4 seconds behind Russell, and he had a few battles along the way, but he kind of had a bit of a lonely race.
Yeah, a bit of no man's land, but that's where the Ferrari was this weekend. We've seen them on circuits where they've done really well, but they really were. They were never going to fight further up the grid than what they wanted, and I don't think they would have been in the fight with if they would have dropped back if Lewis had finished the race too. So they were the 4th best car this weekend, and that's a shame for them, but shame for Carlos. I mean, the sprint race, that move he made on Leclerc or to hold the position. Carlos has got a big stick between his teeth at the moment, and he's not giving Leclerc an inch anywhere, and I think it's starting to show. Just in the way that they're racing each other. I think Carlos can still do some work over one lap to sort of solidify his starting positions above his teammate. But I think, Ferrari won a race this year. I think at the end of the year they won't be happy with their results, but they'll be able to pat themselves on the back and say we're the only team to do it. And with 5 races left, I can't see Red Bull or Max giving up the ghost, but they may have a couple of tracks that suits their car very well, and they might be right back on pace and get some results. But a bit of no man's land this weekend for Charles.
Mercedes, we had Russell qualified in 2nd, finished in 4th. Now, he had to come back from, I don't know exactly where he was, but back at the pack somewhere after he was shunted by Hamilton. And obviously we heard his thoughts pretty quickly after that, which is fair enough. And to be none of us are huge George Russell fans, but what I will say is that after he kind of got it out of his system about how frustrated he was, which is fair enough, you've just been driven off the track by your teammate, totally fair enough. He then got on with his race, and he came back from having been shunted to 4th, and for a minute there potentially thinking that he was on for a podium. So I think that's actually quite impressive when it comes to being able to make up those places, refocus, and get yourself back into a really solid position. Hamilton obviously qualified 3rd, DNF because of that Brit on Brit crime, and we have heard that he's now had a fine for crossing the track, because after he got out of his car, he then walked across the track while it was a hot track, which means that he's had a non-driving reprimand, €50,000 fine. Half of that is suspended for the remainder of the season, providing that there is no further breach of a similar nature. But just a bit of a dumb move, right?
I can see why he walked back, crossed it, because if he had gone to the outside of the track, probably would have taken him 45, 50 minutes to get back to the pit lane. All he had to do was cross that one road, and he was back on the inside, and he was, realistically he'd come out on just at the end of the of that straight on turn 1. Geez, get it together, mate. What are you trying to say? I can see why he did what he did. Reprimands. Who cares? That's semantics.
Yeah.
Who gives a shit about 25 grand? Oh well. He'll probably say, yeah, well, it's worth my time. So
take my one earring out. There you go. There's my 25.
As for the crash, I could see what he was trying to do. I just think Lewis got it a bit wrong. I don't think. He took the blame, and he can take the blame, and no one's going to say anything to him. And it's easier for him to just say, "Yeah, it was my fault. Sorry." Whereas inside, I probably think that he thinks it probably wasn't as much his fault as the ownership he took for it. Because I'm looking at it, and the reality is, when they made contact, George Russell was behind the other 2 cars. Yes, he got squeezed, and 3 doesn't go into 2, and it was always going to happen. Hamilton probably should have left a bit more room, but look, it's a racing incident on the first lap. These things happen. So I'm not too fussed about it.
Yeah, I think he probably, he obviously knew that he was there but didn't realise quite how close he was and therefore how much more space he needed to leave. I definitely call it a racing incident, a bit kind of irresponsible, I suppose, but it is also lap one. You can see why George is frustrated, but again, this is kind of how it's done, right? If you have an issue within the team, you both say your piece and then you get on with it. And Hamilton, after crashing out, didn't then go to the media pen and take it out on a reporter, to be clear. Anyway, let's go to McLaren. 2 of the fastest pit stops of the season, a 1.8 and a 1.9, which is just a phenomenal effort to the pit stop crews over at McLaren. Well done. That's very, very impressive. Again, in serious temperatures as well, right? And when you're doing so many of them in a race, this is probably not where we expected that type of record to be broken. So for the season, so well done to you. That must have been very intense work. Piastri, our boy, qualified 6th, finished 2nd, driver of the day, made us so proud as a nation, just handling the most awkward situations with the grace and just awkward humour that is starting to become his absolute trait. And I just love it so much. The amount of messages that I got from non-Australians going, this guy is so fantastic. We just absolutely love his attitude. And my favourite part, actually, of all of those little media moments was in the cool-down room, and he's lying on his back, and someone says, was it Mercedes, George who crashed into Russell? Oh, sorry, George who crashed into Russell. Freya words. Was it Hamilton and George who came together? And he said, yeah. And he just goes, ha. And it was just this... no words, just so brilliant. All right, that's me done gushing. Oscar, love you. Campy, how proud are you?
Super proud. It's great to see. I mean, this is what we wanted for the Aussie driver on the grid, right? I mean, it's left a big hole in our podcast heart with Danny Rick finishing up last year and then not racing for the majority this year. And we were trying to get excited about Oscar, but we didn't really know much about him. And he was in that McLaren that, at the start of the year that had the aerodynamics of a fridge and couldn't perform anywhere. So, look, am I proud, mate? I'm stoked for the kid, and he's funny. He actually reminds me of Webber when he talks and opens his mouth. Yeah. He's a bit... He's quite, like Webber was quite reserved and very thoughtful in what he said. And, look, we'll watch this kid grow up over the next 5 or 6 years and grow into anyone that he wants to be. And from all accounts, he's a cracking kid off track. But he's doing all the right things for the team and, the brand and the representing the team at the moment. And it's just super stoked for him. He's a genuine talent, which I really like. So hopefully he can get in a world championship winning car and he will get his chance at one stage. And if he's here for the next 10 to 15 years, that's where his career trajectory is at the moment. I mean, all the drivers on the grid will be gone by then, probably except for Lewis until he drives to 50 by that stage. So he's got a red eye. He's really in the box seat to get a top drive in the best car at some stage. So great to see. I just hope he continues it throughout the rest of the year. And who knows, we could see him win in Melbourne next year. How good would that be?
That would be exceptional. Absolutely exceptional. Yeah. And Norris, who qualified in 10th, finished in 3rd. An interesting kind of race for him. We talked about team orders earlier. Okay, they're not a Red Bull or a Ferrari and they weren't going for the win, but at the end of it, Norris was told to hold position. He wasn't happy about it, which, fine. Was that the right call?
Absolutely, it was the right call. If we go back to Japan or the race where he lost, I think at Japan he lost 18 seconds on one of the stints of the tyres. So we know Oscar's biggest problem with his car compared to his teammate at the moment, when he's trying to manage tyres and he's trying to extract pace out of a car where he's not driving it on the limit and he is coasting into corners, and he's still learning how to maximise the potential and the pace out of these tyres. Hence why he's losing such big gaps of time to his teammate. But it's generally on the option compound. It's generally not on the starting compound or the one he qualified on or the fastest one. It seems to be that he hits a hard or a C4 or C5 or something like that, and that's where he's losing his time. So to come into this race, and let's be real, I mean, the gap that Norris made up to him was only 5 or 6 seconds after the pit stops, and he made up some time for the undercut or the overcut that he did and stuff like that. For Oscar to be able to manage the race pace throughout the whole race the way that he did, I think speaks volumes of the growth that he's making. But what good would that McLaren organisation do to swap them round? It's not going to gain them any more points. The only thing it's going to affect is the drivers' standings, and who gives a shit about the drivers' standings if you're not winning? And it just creates tension in the team that doesn't need to be there. And I don't think Lando had the pace to pass him on track if he needed to do it anyway. So that's where I'm at.
Not with 2 laps to go. Not with 2 laps to go.
Totally.
It would be different if you had another 15 laps and there was potential to try and attack the person in front. But when the person in front is Max Verstappen and he's driven off into the summer, there is absolutely nothing to be gained. And in the time that he had left, that's the big thing. I'm like, if you had 15 laps left, I can see why he would say, let us race and, just be careful. Fine, I can see that. But and you've got 1.5 laps to go. It is unnecessary. But we'll see how they manage, again, that dynamic, because Piastri is not a number 2 driver. And so it'll be interesting to see how they manage that moving forward when you know that both of them are both capable and motivated for every single race win. Let's move on to Red Bull. Finally, we had a new same world champion, but a reconfirmed world champion in Max Verstappen. So an epic drive from him. Like you said, the dominance here has kind of plateaued a little bit. We're not seeing those kind of 30-second wins anymore, but it's still not under any type of threat, although Verstappen did say, he said it wasn't quite as comfortable as some of the other ones. So maybe he feels the pressure when they come within 10 seconds of him. But something always tells me that he's got something up his sleeve. Perez, he qualified 13th, finished in 10th, but started from the pit lane. He had a change to a heap of power unit components and made lots of changes on the car, basically including a new chassis. So after his crash in the sprint, so he started from the pit lane because of that. He did finish. There were obviously track limit penalties left, right, and centre. So this is not something that is unique to Perez, but he did have 3 track limit penalties in this race. Horner's still backing him, Campy. He's still saying he's under contract. We want him to start next year. Do you think that's going to happen?
Look, I've always said, if you're going to be a teammate of Max Verstappen and Max is going to do what Max is going to do, you need to be within 3.5 tenths of him in qualifying, and you at least need to be with the best car on the grid. You need to be consistently second or on the podium every time, and you are there as a rear gunner to help out whatever strategy the team needs. Him starting from pit lane or qualifying in 13th, albeit from deleted times, which is unfortunate for him. But this is, in that car, to not get into Q3, I think it's 8 or 9 times now this year. That's just not acceptable. And clearly the pace is not there. For whatever reason, he is struggling big time. And if he has... I would be surprised if Red Bull aren't having the conversations already. I think the conversation, in my mind, it's already made up. I think Danny Rick breaking his hand and missing out on 5 or 6 races has thrown a bit of a spanner in the works for Red Bull, in the sense that they wanted to give Danny Rick half a year and then say, he's performed really well, so let's get him in. I don't think they can do that after 6 races, hence why they're still saying he's contracted, blah, blah, blah. But if he does this a couple more times in a row, or doesn't get on the podium at least 3 times out of the next, or regardless of where, I think, look, the guy's under pressure, and not being on the front row in this car is unacceptable. That's the reality. Knowing what Max does in this car, you've got to be at least second. So.
Yeah, I kind of apply that 3/10 rule, and that's kind of what we're looking at. So, that's what we've done with Aston Martin when we were looking at the data side of that. Stroll very much pushes the absolute bottom of the 3/10 rule when it comes to Alonso, and I think we can apply that same kind of logic here with the Red Bull teammates. It's just that the difficulty is that your bar is so much higher, and so if that driver is not as close in their skill, and also, but I think there's a confidence thing there which is just massive. I think it's very easy to underestimate how much that plays out, both in terms of confidence in the car, but also confidence in yourself and in the team and people rallying around you. I just think that all of this stuff just gets on a kind of treadmill so quickly as soon as you have a few inconsistent results. Plus, you've got the media side of things and everything else. You can see how it all just adds up and equals a huge amount of pressure, which doesn't necessarily, create the conditions for success either. So I don't be too harsh, and then I kind of go, it is a difficult situation that you are in. But even if we apply that 3/10 rule, I haven't looked at the data for those two the way I did with the Aston Martin pair, but it'll be interesting to see where he comes within that. But it's the consistency for me. It's even if you're not second or third, at least consistently be, within that kind of limit behind your teammate. It's the really poor qualifying, the crashing, those inconsistencies that I think, and that's where I do wonder, how much of it is kind of just where his head is at the moment. Or
if we go back to Baku this year, after Baku, I mean, Max got into second, and the gap was 6 or 7 seconds to Perez, and I thought, he's just going to mow this down, absolutely destroy Checo here. No, Checo held pace and won that thing, and he was 7 points behind Max in the World Drivers' Championship. 2 races later, he was 45 points down. Because he stuffed up a qualifying, missed it, and I remember saying at the time, that 40 points is a race win and an extra point for the fastest lap for 8 races now for the rest of the year. There's no way he's going to be able to win that. That gap is insurmountable. And since then, it's just faded and got worse and worse. So anyway, all credit to Max and Red Bull, and excellent. Hopefully you can get an exciting driver as in Danny Rick next year into the number 2, so Danny Rick can come in and get another 10 wins and take it up to Max in the World Championship race, and hopefully Max breaks his hand, misses 6 races, and Danny Rick brings one home.
Talking about things that we would love to see and some bold predictions, there you have it. All right, Campy, who was your driver of the day?
Oscar.
That's the only way you're allowed to say his name, by the way, as well. And it's got Oscar. To have the trail off.
It's like the Roger. It's like the Roger Federer. Roger.
For me, I'm actually going to go to Zhou this weekend because I think coming from 20th and finishing in the points is really impressive given the car that he had, and like you said, he optimised all the opportunities that he had this weekend. So for me, Zhou, Alfa Romeo, you're my team this weekend. That is it from us today. Campy, thank you so much for joining me at that late hour. I feel like with you're kind of gradually easing off and I'm trying to wake up now. So it's a tricky one to manage. But thank you for staying up. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you in the greatest country in the world.
Yeah, you will. You will. Well, coming up to that. So is that 2 weeks away? You're going to be there as well, aren't you?
I'm going to be there. It is 2 weeks away. So any of our Lakeside Drive listeners, if you are going to the Austin Grand Prix, let me know. I will be there. We're very excited about it. It's only 2 weeks away, and then we're really starting towards the end of the season, kind of winding down those last couple of races. But we can't wait to see what they do at this track. It's such a fantastic event. We've got F1 Academy as well, racing at Texas, which will be fantastic. There's a lot to happen there, but we will be joining you for a preview episode for the Texas Grand Prix. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to support the show, you can head over to our website and buy some merch. You can jump onto wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review, 5 stars, not that hard. And of course, jump on over to our Discord. It is a really fun place to be. See you next time.
And YouTube. We need those YouTube subscribers. As soon as we hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, James will lose his mind.
He just won't ever come back. He'll be like, I'm done. That's it. I've hit my 1,000 subs. Never to be seen again. Never to be seen again.
Yeah, very good.